The sun hung low over the rolling hills of Mapleton County, Georgia, casting long shadows across the cracked asphalt of Westland Road. Samuel Carter, 75 years old, guided his rusted 1972 Ford pickup with the steady hands of a man who'd driven these backroads for decades. The truck's engine growled, a familiar rumble that had carried him through a lifetime of joys and sorrows, raising his daughter alone after his wife's passing, building his carpentry business from scratch, and now in his retirement delivering handmade treasures to those he loved. In the truck bed, secured with weathered rope and faded blankets, sat his latest creation, a rocking chair crafted from Georgia oak, its smooth curves and intricate carvings a testament to 50 years of skill. This was no ordinary chair, it was a birthday gift for his daughter Olivia, due home on military leave for the first time in 18 months. Samuel's weathered face softened as he thought of Olivia. From the determined 10-year-old who declared she'd follow in her father's military footsteps to the formidable 4-star general she'd become, the first black woman to achieve that rank, his pride in her was boundless. His own service in Vietnam had been marked by quiet heroism, earning him 2 Purple Hearts, but Olivia had shattered ceilings he'd never dared dream of. The thought brought a faint smile to his lips, though his arthritis-twisted fingers tightened briefly on the steering wheel, a reminder of time's relentless march. The flash of blue lights in his rearview mirror snapped him back to the present. Samuel glanced at the speedometer, 5 miles under the limit, just as he always drove. Decades of experience had taught him caution, especially on roads like these, where a black man in an old truck could attract unwanted attention. He signaled, eased the truck onto the gravel shoulder, and placed both hands deliberately on the wheel, movement slow and visible. The late afternoon air was thick with the scent of pine and dust, and the distant hum of cicadas underscored the stillness. Officer Derek Malone, a stocky 15-year veteran of the Mapleton County Sheriff's Department, approached the driver's side with a swagger that spoke of unchallenged authority. His sunburned face, framed by a buzz cut, was set in a permanent scowl, and his reputation among the county's black residents was no secret. Behind him, 3 younger officers, Rodriguez, Miller, and Cha, followed like shadows, their expressions a mix of deference and unease. Malone didn't bother with pleasantries. "License and registration," he barked, his voice carrying a taunting edge. "Now!" Samuel met Malone's gaze, his dark eyes calm but unyielding. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" he asked, his tone polite but firm, the product of a lifetime navigating such encounters. Malone's lips curled into a smirk. "Broken tail light. Papers, old man, before I lose my patience." Samuel knew his tail lights were finis, checked them religiously before every drive, a habit born of necessity. Still, he reached slowly for his wallet, producing his license, registration, and insurance with the precision of a man who'd done this too many times. "This heap still on the road?" Malone said loudly, glancing at his colleagues as he examined the documents. "Surprised it passes inspection." Officer Rodriguez, the youngest of the group, shifted uncomfortably, his dark eyes flickering to the truck. "Looks like it's been around," he muttered, earning a chuckle from Miller and Chan, who seemed eager to align with Malone's lead. "It passes every year, sir," Samuel said evenly, his voice betraying no hint of the anger simmering beneath his calm. "I maintain it carefully." Malone ignored him, squinting at the license. "Carter, huh? What's in the back of this junker?" "Furniture, sir. A rocking chair I made for my daughter's birthday." Samuel's words were measured, but the mention of his craftsmanship sparked louder laughter from the officers. "Homemade furniture?" Malone mocked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What is this, the pioneer days?" Miller and Chin snickered, while Rodriguez looked away, his jaw tight. Samuel remained silent, his face impassive, though his hands tightened slightly on the wheel. Dignity, he'd learned long ago, was sometimes the only shield available. Malone's eyes landed on the veteran's cap resting on the passenger seat, its faded Vietnam veteran embroidery barely legible. "Vietnam, huh?" he said, leaning closer. "What were you, a janitor?" Samuel's jaw clenched almost imperceptibly. He'd been a combat engineer, dodging gunfire and rebuilding bridges under enemy fire, but he wouldn't give Malone the satisfaction of a reaction. "I served my country proudly, officer," he said simply. Something in Samuel's quiet resolve seemed to ignite Malone's temper. His smirk vanished, replaced by a hard glare. "Step out of the vehicle, Carter." "May I ask why, officer?" Samuel's voice remained steady, though his heart pounded. "Because I said so," Malone snapped. "Step out, or we're gonna have a problem." Samuel complied, his arthritic knee protesting as he moved. Before he could fully step onto the gravel, Malone grabbed his arm, yanking him forward with unnecessary force. Samuel stumbled but caught himself, his dignity intact even as Malone pulled him toward the roadside. "Let's see what you're really hauling," Malone announced, signaling the others to search the truck. "You people always got something to hide." The officers descended on the truck like vultures. Rodriguez hesitated, his hands lingering on the rope securing the rocking chair, but a sharp glance from Malone spurred him into action. They tore through Samuel's tools, tossing wrenches and chisels onto the dirt. Chun unwrapped the chair, pausing as he revealed its intricate carvings. Clearly the work of a master, but Malone's glare prompted him to resume with rougher hands. Samuel stood silently, watching his life's work treated like garbage, his chest tight with suppressed rage. Malone's attention shifted to a metal box under the driver's seat. "What's this?" he demanded, prying it open. "My military memorabilia," Samuel said calmly. "Medals, photographs, letters." Malone appended the box, dumping its contents onto the road. 2 Purple Heart medals glinted in the dirt alongside faded photos of young men in uniform, their faces frozen in time. Samuel flinched, a rare crack in his composure, but Malone didn't notice. "Nothing here," he declared, kicking the medals aside. His gaze fell on the rocking chair, now partially unwrapped. "Fancy for homemade," he said, running a dirty hand over the polished armrest. "I've been a carpenter for 50 years, Samuel explained, fighting to keep his voice even as Malone's grime marred the chair's finish. With deliberate malice, Malone shoved the chair, causing it to tip and slam against the truck bedside. A sharp crack echoed as one of the rockers snapped. Samuel's breath caught, the sound hitting him like a physical blow. "Oops," Malone said, his amusement undisguised. "Guess your handiwork ain't so sturdy." The situation escalated when Malone, growing impatient, climbed into the truck bed and began tossing Samuel's tools onto the road. "Let's make sure there's nothing else you're hiding," he said, his voice laced with menace. Then, in a move that stunned even his fellow officers, Malone leaned against the truck's tailgate and pushed, sending the vehicle rolling a few feet into a shallow ditch beside the road. The chair lurched, its broken rocker dangling, and Samuel's tools scattered further into the mud. "Driving a hazard like this?" Malone said, dusting his hands. "Add unsafe vehicle operation to the list." Rodriguez's eyes widened, and he opened his mouth as if to protest, but Chen's quick shake of the head silenced him. Samuel stood frozen, his heart pounding not from fear but from the humiliation of watching his life's work defiled. Malone scribbled furiously in his ticket book, ripping out a stack of citations. "Broken tail light, unsecured load, obstructing an officer, unsafe operation," he listed, thrusting the papers at Samuel. "That's $1,200 in fines. Pay in 30 days or we'll come for you." Samuel took the citations, his hands trembling slightly not from age, but from the effort to restrain himself. On his fixed income, $1,200 was a fortune, a sum that could drain his savings and force him to choose between groceries and heat. Malone smirked, gesturing to the scattered tools and metals. "Clean up your mess, old man. Or call your daughter to do it." As the officers returned to their patrol car, their laughter carried on the breeze. Samuel stood alone, surrounded by his ruined belongings, the broken chair a silent accusation of the injustice he'd endured. With methodical care, he knelt to gather his medals, brushing dirt from the Purple Hearts that had once symbolized his sacrifice. Each one brought a memory of jungles, gunfire, and a country that hadn't always welcomed him home. He recited the military code of conduct silently, the words a lifeline through decades of indignities. "I am an American fighting for the forces which guard my country and our way of life." Even now, after everything, he believed in those words. But as he worked, a new resolve took root, not just to endure, but to ensure this moment would not be the end of his story. The distant roar of an approaching engine broke his thoughts. A sleek black SUV with military plates crested the hill, its tinted windows hiding the occupant. Samuel paused, his hand closing around a faded photograph of his younger self in uniform. Whatever came next, he would face it with the same dignity that had carried him through war and a lifetime of quiet battles. The dust still swirled on Westland Road, stirred by the retreating patrol cars of Officer Derek Malone and his crew, leaving Samuel Carter alone with his scattered tools and broken rocking chair. The 75-year-old veteran knelt in the Georgia dirt, his calloused hands brushing mud from a Purple Heart medal, its edges worn from years of quiet pride. The weight of the $1,200 in fines hung over him like a storm cloud, a sum that could cripple his modest savings. But Samuel's mind wasn't on money, it was on the chair, his gift for his daughter, Olivia, now marred by a cracked rocker and Malone's careless cruelty. He worked methodically, gathering his belongings, his silence a shield against the humiliation still burning in his chest. A low rumble broke the stillness, not the growl of his old Ford, but something smoother, more deliberate. A sleek black SUV with military plates crested the hill, its tinted windows catching the fading sunlight. Samuel paused, a faded photograph of his Vietnam unit in hand, and squinted at the approaching vehicle. The SUV slowed, pulling onto the shoulder with precision, and the engine cut off. The driver's door opened, and a uniformed military aide stepped out, standing at attention. Then the rear passenger door swung wide, and General Olivia Carter emerged onto the gravel, her presence shifting the air like a gathering storm. At 55, Olivia stood a commanding 5 feet 9 inches, her dress uniform immaculate, the 4 stars on her shoulders gleaming with authority only a handful of Americans ever held. Her complexion, a shade darker than her father's, framed sharp cheekbones and eyes that had stared down generals and warlords alike. Her hair was pulled into a tight regulation bun, accentuating a face that brooked no compromise. Rows of medals adorned her chest, earned across combat zones and diplomatic missions, each one a testament to a career that had shattered barriers. As Director of Special Operations Command at the Pentagon, she oversaw missions that shaped global security, but today, her focus was singular, her father. Olivia's boots crunched on the gravel as she surveyed the scene. The scattered tools, the metals in the dirt, the broken chair leaning against the truck bed, it was a tableau of disrespect that cut deeper than any battlefield wound. Her expression remained neutral, a mask honed by years of command, but her eyes burned with a fury she kept tightly leashed. Samuel rose slowly, brushing dirt from his hands, and met her gaze. "Evelyn," he said softly, using her birth name, a private ritual between them. "I'm fine." "You're not fine, Dad," Olivia replied, her voice low but firm, the military cadence softening just enough to betray her concern. She stepped closer, her aide remaining at a respectful distance, and took in the citations clutched in his hand. "What happened here?" Samuel recounted the stop with his usual economy of words. The false claim about a broken tail light, Malone's taunts, the search without consent, the truck pushed into the ditch, the chair's destruction, and the crushing fines. His tone was steady, but Olivia caught the faint tremor in his hands, a mix of age and suppressed anger. She nodded once, her mind already racing through options, strategies, and consequences. Without a word, she pulled out her phone and began photographing the scene with military precision. The damaged chair, the scattered metals, the citations, and the truck's precarious angle in the ditch. Each click was a step toward accountability. The 4 officers, still parked 100 yards up the road, watching Samuel struggle, scrambled from their patrol car as they noticed the military SUV. Their smug grins faded as Olivia turned, her presence radiating authority even from a distance. Malone led the approach, his swagger faltering as he registered the stars on her shoulders. "General Evelyn Carter, United States Army," she said, her voice carrying the weight of command. "Pentagon, Director of Special Operations Command. I'd like your badge numbers and names, please." The officers froze, the air thick with sudden tension. Malone recovered first, stepping forward with a forced professionalism that didn't reach his eyes. "Officer Derek Malone, ma'am," he said, his tone a stark contrast to the venom he'd spewed at Samuel. "These are Officers Rodriguez, Miller, and Chin. Just a routine traffic stop for safety violations." Olivia's gaze didn't waver. "I see. And these safety violations require pushing a citizen's vehicle into a ditch? Destroying private property? Scattering military medals earned in service?" Her words were calm, but each one landed like a precision strike. Malone shifted, his sunburned face reddening further. "We had reason to suspect contraband, ma'am. Standard procedure." "What probable cause supported this search, Officer Malone?" Olivia cut in, her voice edged with steel. "The vehicle's condition suggested nothing except that it belongs to a man who's maintained it for decades. Did you request consent?" Malone's silence was answer enough. Olivia held up her phone, making a single call. "This is General Carter. I need Captain Mitchell at Westland Road, mile marker 23, immediately." "Yes, that's correct." She ended the call and turned to her father, her formality softening. "Dad, are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Evelyn," Samuel assured her, though his eyes lingered on the broken chair. "The chair took the worst of it. She nodded, helping him gather the last of his tools, her hands gentle but deliberate. The officers watched in uneasy silence, the contrast between their treatment of Samuel and Olivia's respect stark. Within minutes, another vehicle, Araveda County Sheriff's car carrying Captain Mitchell, a harried man in his late 40s who looked distinctly uncomfortable as he exited and saluted Olivia. "General Carter, I had no idea you were in our jurisdiction," Mitchell said, his voice tight. "What's the problem?" "Your officers conducted an illegal search, damaged valuable property, mishandled military commendations, and issued retaliatory citations," Olivia said, her tone dropping to a chilling calm. "I've documented everything." Mitchell glanced at Malone, his expression darkening. "I assure you, General, this isn't how we operate." "And yet here we are," Olivia replied. She handed him her card. "These citations will be dismissed immediately. I expect your internal affairs to review this incident, and I'll be following up personally." Mitchell nodded quickly. "Of course, General. I'll dismiss the citations. Please accept our apologies." "Dismissing citations doesn't address civil rights violations," Olivia said. "This is about accountability." Her words hung heavy, and Malone's jaw tightened, his earlier bravado crumbling under her scrutiny. As Olivia helped Samuel secure his belongings, she turned to the officers one last time. "This isn't over," she said, her voice quiet but certain. "It's only beginning." Mitchell flinched, and the officers stood rigidly, sensing the shift in their world. The confrontation on Westland Road might have ended there, but Mapleton was a small town, and word traveled fast. By evening, the incident was the talk of the county, whispered in diners and debated in living rooms. At the Rusty Nail, a dimly lit bar on the edge of town, Derek Malone held court, nursing a beer and spinning his version of events to a crowd of regulars, mostly white, mostly loyal to the sheriff's department. The bar's neon signs buzzed, casting a red glow over the worn pool tables and sticky floors. "Old man in a junker truck acting like he owns the road," Malone said, his voice loud enough to carry. "Then his daughter shows up, some big shot general, thinking she can throw her weight around. I taught 'em both a lesson." The crowd chuckled, but the laughter was uneasy. A few patrons exchanged glances, aware that Malone's bravado masked something deeper, fear, perhaps, of the woman who'd stared him down without blinking. Olivia, meanwhile, had heard enough through the grapevine to know Malone's ego wouldn't let the matter rest. Against her aide's advice, she decided to confront him where he felt safest. The Rusty Nails door swung open just after 9 p.m., and Olivia stepped inside, her civilian Clothisa-tailored blazer and jeans doing little to diminish her commanding presence. The room fell silent, conversations dying as eyes turned to her. Malone, leaning against the bar, froze mid-sentence, his beer halfway to his lips. "Officer Malone," Olivia said, her voice cutting through the hush. "You seem proud of what happened today. Care to explain why you pushed my father's truck into a ditch and destroyed his property?" The crowd parted, forming a loose circle around them. Malone's face flushed, but he forced a grin. "General Carter, didn't expect you in a place like this. Just blowing off steam, you know? No harm meant." "No harm." Olivia stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "You humiliated a Vietnam veteran, damaged a gift for his family, and issued $1,200 in false fines. That's not steam, officer. That's abuse of power." A murmur rippled through the bar. Some nodded, others shifted uncomfortably, and a few Malone's staunch supporters glared at Olivia. Malone set his beer down, his grin fading. "You think those stars on your shoulders scare me? This is Mapleton, not the Pentagon. We handle our own here." "Then handle it right," Olivia shot back. "Or I'll make sure the whole country knows how Mapleton's sheriff's department treats its citizens." The bartender, a grizzled man named Hank, cleared his throat. "Folks, let's keep this civil. No need for trouble." But trouble was already brewing. A burly man in a flannel shirt, one of Malone's buddies, stood, his voice slurred. "Why don't you go back to D.C., lady? We don't need outsiders stirring things up." Olivia didn't flinch. "I'm not the one stirring, sir. I'm here because my father was wronged, and I'm not leaving until it's made right." The room teetered on the edge of chaos, but Hank banged a fist on the bar. "Enough. Take it outside or settle down." Malone hesitated, his bravado waning under Olivia's unyielding stare. Finally, he grabbed his jacket and stormed out, muttering curses, his friends trailing behind. Olivia lingered a moment, meeting the eyes of the remaining patrons. Some looked away, ashamed, Others nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her courage. She left the bar, her aide waiting by the SUV, and drove back to her temporary base at Fort Benning. The confrontation had done more than rattle. Melanie had lit a spark in Mapleton, dividing the town between those who saw her as a threat and those who saw her as a beacon. Back at her command center, Olivia reviewed the photos from the traffic stop, her mind piecing together the puzzle. Malone's actions weren't random. They fit a pattern she'd seen in conflict zone systematic targeting, designed to intimidate and control. She called Colonel James Reynolds, her chief of staff, and requested background checks on Malone and his team. "Dig deep, James," she said. "This goes beyond one bad officer. I want to know who's pulling the strings." As she hung up, Olivia glanced at a framed photo on her desk. Her father, receiving his honorable discharge in 1971, his face proud but weary. She'd built her career on discipline and strategy, but this fight was personal. Malone had underestimated Samuel Carter, and now he'd underestimated her. That mistake would cost him dearly. The next morning, Captain Mitchell called to confirm the citations were dismissed, his voice dripping with forced deference. Olivia thanked him curtly, but her focus was elsewhere. Reynolds' initial report had arrived, and it was damning. Malone had 46 complaints over 15 years, all from minority residents, all dismissed without investigation. The pattern was clear, and Olivia knew it pointed to something bigger: a network of power protecting men like Malone, a system that thrived on silence. She visited Samuel at his modest home, where he was already repairing the broken chair, his hands steady despite the arthritis. "Evelyn, you don't need to fight my battles," he said, sanding the cracked rocker with care. "This isn't just your battle, Dad," Olivia replied, her voice fierce. "It's about every person in this county who's been treated like you were. I'm not stopping until we tear it down." Samuel looked at her, pride and concern in his eyes. "Just be careful. Men like Malone don't fight fair." Olivia nodded, but her resolve was iron. The Rusty Nail confrontation had shown her the town's fault lines: loyalty to the old guard versus a growing hunger for justice. She'd need allies, evidence, and a strategy to expose the rot in Mapleton. As she left Samuel's workshop, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off, General, or your dad pays." The threat only hardened her determination. This wasn't just a traffic stop gone wrong, it was the opening salvo in a war she intended to win. The air in Mapleton County hung heavy with the promise of rain, the kind of oppressive humidity that clung to the skin and sharpened tempers. At Fort Benning, General Olivia Carter sat in a temporary command center, her eyes fixed on a tablet displaying Colonel James Reynolds' initial report on Officer Derek Malone. 46 complaints over 15 years, all from minority residents, all dismissed without a whisper of discipline. The numbers painted a picture not of negligence but of deliberate protection, a system shielding Malone's abuses. Olivia's jaw tightened, her mind racing through patterns she'd seen in conflict zones: targeted oppression, orchestrated to maintain control. This wasn't just about her father, Samuel Carter, anymore. It was about a town rotting from the inside. At 55, Olivia was no stranger to high-stakes battles. As Director of Special Operations Command, she'd overseen missions that toppled warlords and secured volatile regions, her 4 stars earned through grit and unrelenting precision. But Mapleton was different. This was personal, and the enemy wasn't a distant insurgent but a network woven into the fabric of a small American town. The anonymous text from the night before, "Back off, General, or your dad pays," still burned in her mind, a reminder that the stakes were as high as any she'd faced abroad. She glanced at a photo on her desk. Samuel, 75, receiving his honorable discharge in 1971, his face a mix of pride and exhaustion. The image grounded her, a reminder of why she was here. The confrontation at the Rusty Nail had rattled Malone, but it had also drawn a line in the sand. Mapleton was dividing those who clung to the old guard versus those whispering for change. Olivia knew she needed evidence, allies, and a strategy to expose the rot before it swallowed her father whole. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. Reynolds' voice was crisp, urgent. "General, we've got something." Malone's complaints aren't random. They cluster in specific neighborhoods, Black and Hispanic areas, mostly around the proposed resort development zone. And there's a name tied to some property records: Edward Langston. Olivia's pulse quickened. Langston? Who is he? Old money, 80 years old, head of Langston Holdings. Major player in regional banks and real estate. No public profile, but his companies own half the land pegged for the resort. He's connected to Sheriff Sullivan, Mayor Wilson, and Judge Parker through financial ties and a private country club. Olivia leaned back, pieces clicking into place. The resort a sprawling project touted as Mapleton's economic savior had been a whisper for years, its plans shrouded in secrecy. If Langston was driving it and Malone's harassment targeted landowners in the development zone, this wasn't just prejudice. It was a land grab, weaponizing law enforcement to force sales at rock-bottom prices. Samuel's property, a modest plot passed down through generations, sat at the heart of the proposed golf course. His refusal to sell had made him a target. "Get me everything on Langston," Olivia ordered. "Financials, communications, connections." And cross-reference Malone's stops with property transfers in the last decade. "Yes, ma'am," Reynolds said. "One more thing, FBI agent Marcus Taylor is willing to meet. He's with the Civil Rights Division, says he's seen patterns like this before but needs hard evidence to act." "Set it up," Olivia said, ending the call. Taylor was a calculated risk, an old ally from interagency operations, but cautious, bound by federal red tape. She needed him, but she also needed leverage to push past his hesitance. The meeting took place at a nondescript diner just outside Mapleton, its faded sign reading, Betty's Place, barely visible in the morning mist. Olivia arrived in civilian clothes, her blazer and jeans blending with the locals nursing coffee at the counter. Taylor, a wiry man in his late 40s with a perpetually tired expression, sat in a corner booth, a manila folder in front of him. His brown eyes flicked up as she slid into the seat opposite. "Evelyn," he said, using her birth name with a faint smile. "You're stirring up a hornet's nest." "It's not my nest, Marcus," Olivia replied, her voice low. "They targeted my father, a Vietnam vet, Purple Heart recipient, for a reason. This isn't one bad cop. It's a system." Taylor sighed, pushing the folder toward her. "I pulled what I could on Mapleton. Sheriff's Department has a history of complaints, mostly racial profiling, all buried. But jurisdiction's tricky. We need clear evidence of federal violations, pattern discrimination, not just isolated incidents." Olivia opened the folder, scanning reports of traffic stops and searches. The numbers skewed heavily against Black and Hispanic drivers. "Malone's stops are 3 times higher in minority neighborhoods," she said. 78% of his citations hit Black residents, who are only 32% of the county. "That's not coincidence." "It's suggestive," Taylor admitted, "but not enough for a case. You're too close to this, Evelyn. Your father's involvement complicates things ethically." "Which is why I'm here," she countered. "I'm not handling this alone. I need the FBI to do it right." Taylor studied her, then nodded. "I'll send 2 agents for a preliminary assessment. But you need to tread carefully. If this is as big as you think, they'll fight dirty." "They already are," Olivia said, thinking of the threat on her phone. She handed Taylor a USB drive. "Video from the stop, photos, citations. Start here." As she left the diner, the weight of Taylor's caution settled over her. The FBI was a start, but their pace was glacial and Mapleton's power structure wouldn't wait. She needed faster answers, and that meant leveraging her military resources carefully to avoid accusations of overreach. Back at Fort Benning, Reynolds had new intel. Malone's connected to Judge Parker through a cousin in the county clerk's office, he reported, spreading documents across a table. Parker's dismissed every complaint against Malone. And Sullivan's emails show he's been directing enhanced enforcement in the resort zone for years. Olivia's eyes narrowed. And Langston. His holding company, Mapleton Development Partners, bought 68% of Black-owned land in the zone over the last decade, Reynolds said. Most sales followed police harassment or code violations. Your father's property is the last holdout. The puzzle was taking shape, but Olivia needed more communications, financial trails, something to tie Langston directly to the sheriff's actions. She authorized a discreet cyber sweep, using Pentagon resources to monitor local networks for unusual activity. It was a risk, skirting the edges of domestic surveillance laws, but the threat to her father justified it. That night, the stakes became terrifyingly clear. Olivia was driving back from Fort Benning on a deserted county road, the SUV's headlights cutting through the darkness. Her aide, Lieutenant Daniels, was at the wheel, his focus on the winding asphalt. Ahead, a pickup truck sat angled across the road, its hood up, a lone figure waving a flashlight. Daniels slowed, his hand drifting to his sidearm. Looks like a breakdown, ma'am, he said, but his voice was tense. Olivia's instincts, honed in combat zones, screamed warning. Don't stop, she ordered. Go around. Daniels swerved onto the shoulder. But as they passed, the figure dropped the flashlight, revealing a glint of metal, a shotgun. A second man emerged from the ditch aiming a rifle. Daniels floored the gas, tires screeching as shots rang out, one grazing the SUV's rear fender. Olivia ducked, her hand on her phone, already dialing base security. Ambush, County Road 17, mile marker 8. 2 shooters armed. Need backup now. The SUV roared through the night, the attacker's truck giving chase for a mile before peeling off into a side road. Daniels kept driving, his knuckles white, until they reached the safety of Fort Benning's gates. Olivia's heart pounded, not from fear but from rage. This wasn't a random attack, it was a message, and Malone's fingerprints were all over it. At the base, she debriefed with Reynolds and a small team of military police. Ballistics confirmed the rifle rounds matched standard law enforcement issue, and a grainy security camera from a nearby gas station caught the pickup's partial plate, registered to a known associate of Malone's. They're escalating, Olivia said, her voice cold. They know we're digging. Reynolds nodded grimly. We've got something else. The cyber sweep picked up encrypted emails between Sullivan and an unknown account. They mention clearing obstacles in the resort zone and reference a senior partner. Langston fits the profile. Olivia's mind raced. Langston wasn't just a financier, was the architect, using Sullivan, Parker, and Malone as enforcers to secure his empire. But proving it required more than emails. She needed a smoking gun, something to force the FBI's hand. The next morning, she visited Samuel at his home, a modest clapboard house surrounded by oak trees. He was in his workshop, sanding the broken rocking chair, his hands steady despite the ordeal. The sight of him, still creating beauty amid chaos, softened the edges of Olivia's anger. Dad, I need you to be careful, she said, sitting beside him. They tried to hit me last night. Samuel's hands paused, his eyes meeting hers. Evelyn, I've lived through worse than Malone. But you read taking on something bigger than one man. I know, she said. It's not just Malone. It's a network, Sheriff Sullivan, Mayor Wilson, Judge Parker, and a man named Edward Langston. They're after your land, Dad, for a resort. That's why they targeted you. Samuel's face hardened, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. The Hendersons sold last year after months of citations. The Johnsons, too. I thought it was just life here, not a plan. It's both, Olivia said. They've weaponized prejudice to steal what's yours. But I'm not letting them win. Samuel set down his sandpaper, his voice quiet but firm. I'm not leaving, Evelyn. This land's been in our family since Reconstruction. It's more than dirt, it's who we are. Olivia nodded, her resolve mirroring his. Then we fight. But I need you safe. I'm assigning a security detail discreet to watch the house. Samuel frowned but didn't argue. He knew his daughter's tone, command, unyielding. As she left, Olivia's phone buzzed with a call from Taylor. Evelyn, my agents found something, he said. Malone's phone records showed texts to a burner, bragging about putting the old man in his place. The burners linked to a meeting at a country club owned by Langston's company. Olivia's pulse quickened. When's the meeting? Tonight, Taylor said. But it's a closed event. You'd need an invite to get in. Then get me one, Olivia said. This is our chance. The country club, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Mapleton, was a fortress of privilege, its manicured lawns and marble columns a stark contrast to the county's struggling neighborhoods. Olivia arrived in a tailored black dress, her military bearing softened but unmistakable. Taylor's contact, a disgruntled former employee, had slipped her an invite under a false name. Inside, the air smelled of cigar smoke and old money, the crowd a mix of local elites and out-of-town investors. She spotted Sullivan first, his heavy frame hunched over a whiskey, talking to Mayor Wilson, whose politician's smile never reached his eyes. Judge Parker lingered nearby, his gaunt face tense. But it was the man at the center of the room who drew her attention, Edward Langston, 80, with silver hair and a tailored suit that screamed generational wealth. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room like a predator assessing prey. Olivia moved closer, blending with the crowd, her earpiece relaying updates from Reynolds, who was monitoring from a van outside. Langston's talking to a state senator, Reynolds whispered. They're discussing finalizing the resort footprint. Your father's land came up. Olivia's blood ran cold. She edged toward Langston's table, catching fragments of conversation. Carter's stubborn, Sullivan muttered. But Malone's handling it. Another stop or two he'll sell. Langston's voice was low-cultured. Ensure it's clean, Richard. No more mistakes. The investors are impatient. Olivia's hand tightened around her glass, her mind recording every word. She snapped a discreet photo with her phone, capturing Langston and Sullivan together, a piece of evidence to bolster Taylor's case. But as she turned to leave, Malone entered, his eyes locking onto her. Recognition flashed across his face, followed by fury. General Carter, he said loudly, drawing attention. Didn't know you were a member here. The room quieted, heads turning. Olivia met his gaze, unflinching. Just visiting, officer. Enjoying the company. Malone's grin was predatory. Careful, General. Mapleton's a small town. Easy to get lost. Not for me, Olivia replied, her voice ice. She left before he could escalate, her heart pounding with the weight of what she'd heard. Langston wasn't just involved, it was the puppet master. And Malone was his attack dog. Back at Fort Benning, Olivia briefed Reynolds and Taylor, sharing the photo and recording. This ties Langston to Sullivan and the resort, she said. It's enough to expand the FBI's investigation. Taylor nodded, but his caution remained. It's a start, Evelyn. But we need more financial records, direct orders. Langston's insulated himself well. Then we keep digging, Olivia said. And we protect my father. They're not stopping, and neither am I. As she prepared for the next move, a call from Samuel interrupted her. Evelyn, someone's been by the house, he said, his voice steady but tense. Left a note on the porch. Says sell or burn. Olivia's grip tightened on the phone. The conspiracy was closing in and time was running out. She ordered an immediate increase in Samuel's security, but deep down, she knew defense wasn't enough. To save her father, she had to strike at the heart of Langston's empire, and she had to do it before they struck first. The sky over Mapleton County was bruised with storm clouds, the air thick with the metallic tang of impending rain. General Olivia Carter stood in her temporary command center at Fort Benning, her eyes scanning a map of the county pinned to the wall. Red markers dotted the proposed resort development zone, each one a property once owned by Black or Hispanic families, now swallowed by Edward Langston's empire. Her father's land, Samuel Carter's modest plot, a stubborn holdout, sat at the heart of it all, a green pin defying the red tide. The revelation at the country club, where she'd overheard Langston and Sheriff Sullivan plotting to clear obstacles, had confirmed her worst fears. This wasn't just harassment. It was a calculated campaign to steal legacies, and Samuel was their primary target. At 55, Olivia was a four-star general who'd faced down warlords and navigated Pentagon politics. But the ambush on County Road 17 2 nights ago, shots fired at her SUV. The pickup's partial plate tied to Malone's associate had shaken her. Not because she feared for herself, but because it meant Langston's network was desperate, and desperate men were dangerous. The note left on Samuel's porch, sell or burn, was a promise, not a threat. Olivia had doubled his security, discreet operatives posing as utility workers, but she knew defense alone wouldn't stop what was coming. Her phone buzzed, Colonel James Reynolds' name flashing. General, we've got trouble, he said, his voice taut. Your father's workshop, it's gone. Fire last night, total loss. Local fire chiefs calling it electrical, but the accelerant traces say arson. Olivia's grip tightened, her knuckles whitening. Is Dad okay? He's unharmed at home with the security team, Reynolds said. But he's shaken. Refuses to leave the property. I'm on my way, Olivia said, already grabbing her jacket. The workshop wasn't just a building, it was Samuel's sanctuary, where he'd crafted furniture, processed his Vietnam trauma, and taught Olivia the patience that shaped her career. Burning it was an attack on his soul. The drive to Samuel's house was a blur, the Georgia pines flashing by as Olivia's mind raced. Malone, Sullivan, Langston, they were tightening the noose, hoping to break Samuel's resolve. She pulled into his driveway, the acrid stench of smoke hitting her before she saw the wreckage. The workshop, a sturdy barn-like structure that had stood for decades, was a smoldering ruin, charred beams jutting like broken bones. Samuel stood at the edge, his 75-year-old frame silhouetted against the devastation, a sledgehammer in hand as he pried at a blackened table, salvaging what little remained. Dad, Olivia called, stepping out of the SUV. Her voice softened as she approached, her boots crunching on ash. You shouldn't be out here. Samuel didn't look up, his hands steady despite the arthritis. Had to see it myself, he said, his voice rough. 50 years of tools, Evelyn. My father's chisels, my grandfather's plane. Gone. Olivia's chest tightened, the weight of his loss mirroring her own rage. She knelt beside him, touching his arm. We'll rebuild, Dad. Better than before. He met her eyes, pride and sorrow mingling. It's not the tools, Evelyn. It's what they meant. This was my place where I could be me, not what they wanted me to be. Olivia nodded, understanding too well. Mapleton's power structure. Langston, Sullivan, Malone hadn't just burned a building. They'd attacked Samuel's identity, hoping to crush his defiance. They think this'll make you sell, she said. They're wrong. Samuel's lips twitched, a faint smile. Stubborn runs in the family. But the retaliation didn't stop there. 2 days later, Olivia received a call from Sarah Johnson, the high school teacher who'd begun organizing community meetings. General, it's Samuel, Sarah said, her voice trembling. He was attacked at the grocery store parking lot. He's at County General, stable but hurt bad. Olivia's blood ran cold. She sped to the hospital, her SUV weaving through Mapleton's quiet streets, her mind a storm of guilt and fury. She should have insisted Samuel stay at Fort Benning, should have anticipated this. The hospital's sterile halls echoed with her footsteps as she reached the ER, where Samuel lay in a bed, his face bruised, ribs bandaged, and Ford dripping into his arm. A concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a sprained wrist, the damage from 2 masked men who'd struck him from behind, beating him until a bystander's shout scared them off. Evelyn, Samuel rasped, his voice weak but defiant. I'm still here. Olivia took his hand, her military composure cracking. I'm so sorry, Dad. This is my fault. No, he said firmly. It's theirs. Don't you dare carry their weight. The doctor, a young woman with kind eyes, briefed Olivia outside the room. He's tough, General. He'll recover, but he needs rest. No stress if you can manage it. Olivia nodded, but stress was Mapleton's currency now. The attack wasn't random security footage, grainy but clear, showed a pickup matching the one from her ambush, linking it to Malone's circle. She called FBI agent Marcus Taylor, her voice steel. Marcus, my father was assaulted. I've got video tying it to Malone's crew. You need to move now. Taylor's sigh was audible. Evelyn, we're building the case, but we need more than a partial plate. I've got agents interviewing witnesses, but... Then I'll get you more. Olivia cut in, hanging up. She wasn't waiting for bureaucracy while her father lay in a hospital bed. The community, though, wasn't waiting either. Sarah Johnson's next meeting, held in the Mapleton Library's cramped community room, drew a crowd that spilled into the hallway. Black families who'd faced years of harassment, Hispanic residents tired of pretextual stops, and even white progressives uneasy with the sheriff's iron grip. Sarah stood at the front, her teachers poised, steadying the room. We're here to demand accountability, she said. What happened to Samuel Carter isn't isolated. It's a pattern, and it ends now. Dorothy Williams, a black woman in her 50s, stood first. My son got stopped by Malone for a broken taillight that wasn't broken. They tore his car apart, no warrant, no reason. My complaint? Vanished. Others followed, their stories a chorus of indignity searches without consent, fines that drained savings, threats to know your place. Olivia, seated in the back in civilian clothes, listened, her heart heavy with recognition. This was the system she'd glimpsed at the country club, weaponized to protect Langston's resort dream. But the meeting's hope was fragile, and Malone knew it. The library doors burst open, and Malone strode in, flanked by officers Miller and Chin, their uniforms a deliberate show of force. The room froze, the air electric with fear. Evening, folks, Malone said, his voice loud, mocking. Heard you're talking about my department. Thought I'd join the conversation. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Officer Malone, this is a public meeting. You're welcome, but please wait your turn. Malone ignored her, his eyes scanning the crowd. Lots of familiar faces. Funny how the ones who can't follow traffic laws always got the loudest complaints. The intimidation work phone stopped recording, eyes dropped to the floor. Olivia stood, her presence cutting through the tension like a blade. Officer Malone, she said, her voice carrying the authority of a battlefield commander. This meeting is protected by the Constitution. Your presence here is an attempt to silence free speech. Malone's grin faltered as he recognized her, but he recovered. General Carter, always a pleasure. Just making sure things stay peaceful. Peaceful? Olivia stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. You burned my father's workshop. You put him in the hospital. That's not peace, that's war. The crowd stirred, murmurs of agreement rising. Malone's face reddened, but before he could respond, a young black man, Jamal, Dorothy's son, stood. "She's right. You've been terrorizing us for years, Malone. We're done being scared." The room erupted, voices overlapping in a surge of defiance. Malone and his officers retreated, their intimidation backfiring. Olivia stayed, helping Sarah organize the crowd into action, collecting statements, planning a march. But the victory was short-lived. That night, Olivia's hotel room was breached. She returned from the meeting to find her laptop open, files on Langston's financials missing. A note taped to the screen read, "Last warning." Her security team swept the room, finding no prints, but the message was clear. Langston's network was watching, and they were bold enough to strike at her directly. Olivia didn't sleep. She relocated to a secure safe house at Fort Benning and tasked Reynolds with tracing the breach. By dawn, he had Alita hotel security guard, paid off by a man matching Miller's description, had disabled the cameras. But the stolen files were a decoy. Olivia had backed everything to a secure military server. The real loss was time, and she was running out. Determined to recover the initiative, Olivia took a calculated risk. She tailed Miller, using a civilian car borrowed from a base mechanic, her training in covert ops guiding her. Miller led her to a derelict warehouse on the county's edge, a known hangout for Malone's crew. Parking out of sight, Olivia crept closer, her phone recording as Miller met a man she recognized from the country club, a low-level investor tied to Langston. Their conversation, caught in fragments, confirmed her suspicions. The general's getting too close. Langston wants her out, one way or another. Olivia's heart raced, but she stayed hidden, slipping away before they spotted her. The recording was gold direct evidence of Langston's orders, but it wasn't enough to arrest him. She sent it to Taylor, who promised to escalate but warned, "Evelyn, you're playing with fire. If they're this bold, they won't stop at your father." The final blow came at a community march, organized by Sarah to protest the sheriff's abuses. Hundreds gathered at Mapleton's courthouse square, their signs demanding justice for Samuel and end police corruption. Olivia walked near the front, her presence a silent endorsement, while Samuel, against doctor's orders, insisted on joining, his arm in a sling but his head high. The crowd's chants echoed, a mix of hope and anger, but the mood shifted as a counter-protest emerged. Malone's supporters, mostly white, waving blue-line flags and shouting slurs. Tensions boiled over when a bottle sailed from the counter-protest, shattering near Sarah. Chaos erupted, fists flying as Malone's group charged. Olivia shielded a young protester, her military instincts kicking in, while Samuel, defying his injuries, pulled Jamal from the fray, his voice calm but commanding. "Stay strong, son. Don't give them what they want." Sheriff's deputies, led by Malone, arrived, but instead of calming the riot, they targeted the protesters, swinging batons. Olivia caught Malone's eye, his smirk daring her to act. She knew a public clash would play into his hands. Instead, she rallied the crowd to disperse, saving lives but burning with frustration. The riot made national news. Mapleton's divisions laid bare. Olivia, now suspended from military duty after senators questioned her personal vendetta, felt the walls closing in. But the community's resolve hardened. At a late-night meeting in Sarah's classroom, residents pledged to document every incident, forming a civilian oversight group. Olivia, stripped of her stars but not her fight, trained them in evidence collection, her voice fierce. "They want us divided. We won't give them that." As she left, her phone buzzed a photo from an unknown number, showing Samuel asleep in his hospital bed, taken hours ago. The message read, "Next time he doesn't wake up." Olivia's vision blurred with rage, but she channeled it into resolve. Langston's empire was cracking, and she'd tear it down no matter the cost. The fluorescent lights of Mapleton High School's library buzzed softly, casting a pale glow over the packed community room. Folding chairs, meant for 50, held nearly double that, with latecomers leaning against bookshelves or sitting cross-legged on the floor. The air was thick with nervous energy, the kind that comes when a town's secrets are dragged into the open. Sarah Johnson, a 42-year-old English teacher with a reputation for fearless honesty, stood at the front, her hands clasped to steady her nerves. Tonight's meeting, billed as a community relations forum, was anything but neutral. It was a reckoning sparked by the brutal attack on Samuel Carter and fueled by General Olivia Carter's unrelenting pursuit of justice. Outside, the Georgia night pressed against the windows, humid and restless, as if Mapleton itself were holding its breath. Olivia sat in the back row, her civilian clothes a simple sweater and jeans doing little to mask her commanding presence. At 55, she was a 4-star general suspended from duty, her military authority stripped by political pressure, but her resolve burned brighter than ever. The photo of her father, bruised and asleep in a hospital bed, sent from an unknown number with the chilling message, "Next time, he doesn't wake up," was seared into her mind. She'd moved Samuel to a secure safe house at Fort Benning against his protests, but Mapleton's power structure Edward Langston, Sheriff Sullivan, Officer Derek Malin was just targeting him. They were targeting anyone who dared speak out. Sarah cleared her throat, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her eyes sweeping the diverse crowd. Black families who'd endured decades of harassment, Hispanic residents weary of pretextual stops, white progressives uneasy with the status quo, and even a few business owners who'd quietly broken ranks with the town's elite. "We're here to talk about what's happening in Mapleton. About Samuel Carter, beaten for no reason. About a sheriff's department that protects its own while terrorizing us. This isn't just one man's story, it's ours." The room stirred, heads nodding, but fear lingered in the glances toward the door. Malone's appearance at the last meeting, his uniformed presence a blatant intimidation tactic, had left its mark. Olivia scanned the crowd, noting the faces Dorothy Williams, whose son had been targeted by Malone, Jamal, the young man who'd stood up to him, and Maria Gonzalez, a grocery store clerk who'd lost her brother to a questionable police stop. Their courage was a spark, but sparks could be snuffed out. Dorothy stood first, her voice trembling but resolute. "3 months ago, Malone stopped my Jamal for a broken tail light that wasn't broken. Tore his car apart, no permission, no nothing. I filed a complaint, gone, like it never existed. Same thing happened to Samuel Carter, and now he's in a hospital bed. How many more before we say enough?" Her words broke the dam. Maria spoke next, her accent thick with emotion. "My brother Carlos was stopped last year. They said he resisted. He didn't. He was in a coma for a week, then gone. The sheriff called it an accident. I called it murder." The stories poured out, each one a thread in a tapestry of injustice. Fines that drained savings, searches without warrants, threats to know your place. Olivia listened, her heart heavy with recognition. This was the system she'd glimpsed at the country club, orchestrated by Langston to clear land for his resort, with Malone as the enforcer and Sullivan as the shield. But the room wasn't just a litany of pine, it was an awakening. For the first time, Mapleton's silenced voices were speaking as one. The library door swung open with a bang, and Derek Malone strode in, flanked by officers Miller and Chun. Their uniforms gleamed under the lights, a calculated show of power. The room froze, the air electric with dread. Malone's sunburned face twisted into a smirk. "Evening, folks," he said, his voice loud enough to drown out Maria's fading words. "Heard you're discussing my department again. Thought I'd make sure you get your facts straight." Sarah stepped forward, her petite frame belying her steel. "Officer Malone, this is a public meeting. You're welcome to join, but please respect our speakers." Malone ignored her, his eyes raking the crowd. "I see the usual troublemakers. Dorothy, Jamal, Marie always complaining, never following the rules. Maybe if you respected the law, we wouldn't have these problems." The intimidation was working. Phones lowered, eyes dropped, and a few attendees edged toward the exit. Olivia stood, her presence a quiet thunder. "Officer Malone," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a battlefield commander. "This gathering is protected by the First Amendment. Your presence here is an attempt to silence free speech and assembly." Malone's smirk faltered as he recognized her, but he leaned in, his voice low and venomous. "General Carter, you're out of your league. This ain't the Pentagon. Keep pushing, and your daddy's not the only one who'll pay." The crowd gasped, the threat hanging like smoke. Olivia didn't flinch, her eyes locked on his. "You burned his workshop. You put him in the hospital. And now you're threatening me in front of witnesses. That's not power, Malone. That's desperation." Jamal stood, his fists clenched. "She's right. You've been running this town like your personal playground, Malone. We're done." The room erupted, voices rising in a chorus of defiance. Dorothy shouted, "Justice for Samuel," and Maria joined, "No more silence." Malone's face reddened, his hand twitching toward his baton, but Sarah's sharp voice cut through. "Officers, leave now or we'll file harassment charges with every news outlet in Georgia." Outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Malone and his men retreated, their boots echoing in the sudden silence. The crowd's energy shifted, fear giving way to resolve. Olivia stayed, helping Sarah organize the group into action, collecting written statements, assigning volunteers to record future incidents. "This is how we fight," Olivia told them, her voice fierce. "With truth, with evidence, with each other." But the victory was fleeting. Later that night, as Olivia reviewed the day's recordings in her Fort Benning safe house, her phone buzzed with a call from Reynolds. "General, we've got a problem," he said, his voice grim. "Someone broke into your hotel room. Took your laptop and the hard copy files on Langston's financials." Olivia's blood ran cold. "The files were decoys," she said, her mind racing. "Everything's backed up on the server. But they're bold enough to hit me directly now." "We found a note," Reynolds added. "Last warning. Security footage shows a man matching Miller's build disabling the cameras. The hotel guard was paid off." Olivia's jaw tightened. Langston's network was closing in, and her suspension left her vulnerable, cut off from military resources. She needed to act fast before they struck again. The next morning, she met Sarah at the high school where a fledgling oversight group was taking shape. Sarah's classroom, usually filled with essays and chalk dust, was now a war room, with maps, witness statements, and a whiteboard listing Malone's known associates. "We're calling it the Mapleton Accountability Network," Sarah said, her eyes bright with purpose. "We've got 20 volunteers already documenting stops, filming interactions. But people are scared, General. After the riot, Malone's men are everywhere." Olivia nodded, her mind on the Courthouse Square riot, where Malone's supporters had turned peaceful protest into chaos. Samuel, defying his injuries, had pulled Jamal from the fray, his courage a beacon. "They're scared because we're effective," Olivia said. "Keep recording, keep organizing. I'll train your team on evidence collection, chain of custody, timestamps, everything the FBI needs." Sarah hesitated, then lowered her voice. "There's something else. One of my students, Elena, says her uncle used to work for the sheriff's department. Quit last year, but he knows things about Malone, Sullivan, maybe even Langston. He's willing to talk, but only to you." Olivia's pulse quickened. A whistleblower could be the break she needed. "Where is he?" "Hiding out at a friend's cabin, 10 miles out of town," Sarah said. "He's paranoid, says Sullivan's got eyes everywhere." Olivia arranged the meeting for dusk, driving a borrowed pickup to avoid attention. The cabin, tucked in a pine grove, was a ramshackle hideout, its windows boarded. Elena's uncle, Ray Thompson, was a wiry man in his 50s, his eyes darting like a hunted animal. "General Carter," he said, his voice low. "I only came 'cause Elena trusts Sarah. I know what they did to your dad." "Tell me," Olivia said, her tone calm but urgent. Ray lit a cigarette, the smoke curling in the dim light. "Malone's not the brain, the muscle. Sullivan gives the orders, but Langston calls the shots. They've been targeting Black and Hispanic landowners for years, hitting them with fines, stops, whatever it takes to make them sell. Your dad's land is the last piece for their golf course. Sullivan told Malone to break him, no matter what." Olivia's hands clenched, but she kept her voice steady. "Do you have proof?" Ray pulled a flash drive from his pocket. "Recordings, emails, a ledger of payoffs from Langston's company to Sullivan. I kept it quiet 'cause I got kids. But after what they did to Samuel, I can't stay silent." Olivia took the drive, her mind racing. This was the smoking gun she'd needed, but it came with risks. Ray was a target now, and so was she. "Stay hidden," she told him. "I'll get this to the FBI." As she drove back, headlights flared in her rearview mirror truck, tailing too close. Her training kicked in. She took a sharp turn onto a dirt road, the truck following, its engine roaring. Olivia floored the gas, weaving through pines, her phone dialing Reynolds. "I'm being tailed, Old Mill Road. Send backup." The truck rammed her bumper, jolting her forward. Olivia swerved, narrowly avoiding a ditch, and spotted a clearing ahead. She slammed the brakes, spinning the pickup to face her pursuer. The truck stopped, its driver obscured by glare, but Olivia knew Malone's crew when she saw them. She stepped out, her sidearm drawn but low, her voice cutting through the night. "You want me? Come get me." The truck's door opened, and Officer Miller emerged, his face pale. "You're done, Carter," he shouted, but his voice cracked. Before he could act, sirens wailed Reynolds' team, closing in. Miller scrambled back, peeling out as the cavalry arrived. Olivia handed the flash drive to Reynolds, her heart still pounding. "Get this to Taylor. It's everything we need." Back at the safe house, she called Samuel, his voice a bomb despite his pain. "Evelyn, you're stirring up a storm," he said, half teasing. "Just make sure you come through it." "I will, Dad," she promised. "And so will Mapleton." The community was rising, their voices growing louder, but Langston's shadow loomed larger. Olivia knew the fight was far from over, and the next move would test them all. The pre-dawn stillness of Mapleton County was shattered by the low hum of military vehicles converging on Fort Benning's command center. Inside, General Olivia Carter stood before a wall of monitors, her eyes locked on a grainy satellite image of an abandoned warehouse on the county's edge. The flash drive from Ray Thompson, the whistleblower, had cracked open the conspiracy encrypted emails, payoff ledgers, and recordings tying Sheriff Sullivan, Judge Parker, and the elusive Edward Langston to a decades-long scheme to seize black-owned land for a luxury resort. But the warehouse, flagged by Ray's intel as a hub for off-the-books operations, was the key to dismantling it. Olivia, at 55, was a four-star general stripped of her command by political pressure, but her resolve was unbreakable. Tonight, she'd lead a raid to end Langston's empire or die trying. The command center buzzed with controlled chaos. FBI agents, military police, and Olivia's trusted team, led by Colonel James Reynolds, coordinated final preparations. Olivia's suspension limited her official authority, but FBI agent Marcus Taylor, now fully committed after Ray's evidence, had secured a joint task force under federal jurisdiction. The warehouse wasn't just a storage site, it was a nerve center where Langston's operatives destroyed evidence in planned retaliatory strikes. The arson of Samuel Carter's workshop, the assault on the 75-year-old veteran, and the ambush on Olivia's SUV were all orchestrated from there. Time was running out. Langston's network was scrambling to cover its tracks, and Samuel, now in a Fort Benning safe house, remained a target. Olivia briefed the team, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We've identified 3 entry points to the warehouse," she said, pointing to a blueprint on a screen. "Thermal imaging shows 6 heat signatures, 2 guards at the perimeter. For inside, likely including high-value targets. Our objective is to secure evidence, neutralize threats, and apprehend suspects. Non-lethal force unless absolutely necessary. We're not just taking down a building, we're exposing a conspiracy that's bled this county for generations." Reynolds, his face etched with concern, leaned in. "General, you're not cleared for field ops. If you're leading this, it's as a civilian. That's a risk." Olivia's eyes met his, unyielding. "My father's life is on the line, James. I'm not sitting this out." Taylor, adjusting his Kevlar vest, nodded. "We've got your back, Evelyn. But Langston's men are armed, and they won't go quietly. Expect resistance." The team mobilized under a moonless sky, black SUVs and tactical vans rolling silently toward the warehouse. Olivia, in tactical gear stripped of insignia, rode in the lead vehicle, her mind sharp with the instincts of a combat veteran. The warehouse loomed ahead, a rusted hulk surrounded by overgrown weeds and broken fences, its windows dark but for the faint glow of activity inside. Satellite imagery had confirmed recent vehicle movements, and Ray's intel suggested a document shredding Operation Langston's last-ditch effort to erase his tracks. Olivia's team split into 3 units. Alpha, led by her, would breach the main entrance. Bravo, under Taylor, would secure the rear, and Charlie, with Reynolds, would neutralize the perimeter guards. The plan was surgical disable security, overwhelm resistance, and seize evidence before it could be destroyed. But Olivia knew plans rarely survived contact with the enemy. At 3:47 a.m., Charlie team moved first, using silence tasers to drop the 2 perimeter guards, private security contractors with military-grade gear. Olivia's earpiece crackled with Reynolds' voice. "Perimeter clear. You're a go." Alpha team advanced, Olivia at the point, her pulse steady as she signaled for a breacher to place a low-yield charge on the warehouse door. The muffled blast echoed, and the door swung inward, revealing a cavernous interior lit by flickering fluorescence. Stacks of crates and industrial shredders filled the space, their hum masking the team's entry. Olivia's team fanned out, weapons low, as Bravo breached from the rear. The first sign of trouble came from a balcony overlooking the floor. A contractor, hidden behind a crate, opened fire with an AR-15, the shots sparking against metal. Olivia dove behind a pallet, her team returning fire with stun rounds. "Suppress and flank," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. 2 agents circled left, forcing the shooter to retreat, but more footsteps echoed, reinforcements, drawn by the gunfire. Taylor's voice crackled in her ear. Bravo's engaged at the rear. We've got 3 hostiles heavily armed. They're protecting something looks like a vault. Olivia's mind raced. The vault could hold the motherlode financial records, communications, proof of Langston's direct involvement. She signaled her team to push forward, weaving through crates as gunfire erupted sporadically. A second contractor appeared, lobbing a flashbang that exploded in a blinding burst. Olivia's training kicked inch rolled left, her vision clearing just in time to tackle an attacker aiming at her team. A swift strike to his temple dropped him, and she zip-tied his wrists, her breath steady despite the adrenaline. The warehouse was a maze, but Olivia's team moved with precision, clearing sectors methodically. They reached the vault, a reinforced steel door embedded in a concrete wall, its keypad glowing red. Taylor's team joined them, dragging a capture contractor. He says the vault's got everything, Taylor panted. Contracts, payoffs, even recordings of Langston's orders. But it's rigged wrong code and it incinerates the contents. Olivia cursed under her breath. They needed a tech, but time was against them. She turned to the contractor, a grizzled man with a scarred face. Code, she demanded, her voice ice. He sneered. Go to hell, lady. Before she could respond, a new voice cut through the din, cultured, calm and chillingly familiar. Enough, General Carter. You're persistent, I'll give you that. Edward Langston, 80, stepped from the shadows of a side corridor, flanked by 2 armed guards. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, his tailored suit absurdly out of place amid the chaos. In his hand was a remote, its red button pulsing ominously. Olivia's team trained their weapons, but she raised a hand, signaling restraint. Langston, she said, her voice steady. You're done. The FBI's here, the evidence is secured. That remote won't save you. Langston's smile was thin, predatory. This remote triggers the incinerator in the vault. One press and 50 years of records, my family's legacy go up in flames. You'll have nothing. Olivia's heart pounded, but her face betrayed nothing. You think burning paper saves you? We've got Ray Thompson's drive, your emails, your payoffs. You're finished. Langston's eyes narrowed, a flicker of doubt. Thompson's a dead man. And so's your father if you don't back off. This county is mine, General. Always has been. Olivia stepped closer, her voice low, lethal. My father's stronger than you'll ever understand. And this county belongs to its people, not you. The standoff stretched, seconds ticking like hours. Then a shout from Reynolds. Vault's open. A tech from Charlie team working frantically had bypassed the keypad. Langston's composure cracked, his thumb hovering over the remote. Olivia lunged, tackling him as Taylor's team subdued the guards. The remote skidded across the floor, disarmed by a swift kick from an agent. Langston struggled, his polished veneer gone. You have no idea who I am, he spat as Olivia zip-tied his wrists. My family built this county. And tore it apart, Olivia replied, hauling him to his feet. Today you learn what justice feels like. The vault yielded a treasure trove, ledgers dating to the 1950s, detailing land seizures through intimidation and legal manipulation, recordings of Langston ordering Sullivan to handle Samuel, and financial trails linking the resort to state politicians and national investors. The oldest documents revealed a chilling truth. Langston's grandfather had pioneered the scheme, using Jim Crow laws to strip black families of their land, a playbook refined over generations. As the team secured the evidence, Olivia's radio crackled with news. State troopers had apprehended Derek Malone at the Georgia border, his truck loaded with $50,000 cash and fake IDs. He'd been fleeing, his bravado shattered by the task force's raid. Sullivan and Parker, alerted by the warehouse breach, were detained at their homes, their networks unraveling under federal pressure. Olivia stepped outside, the dawn sky streaked with pink, and called Samuel. Dad, we got them, she said, her voice thick with relief. Langston, Malone, Sullivan, theory in custody. The evidence is secure. Samuel's voice, steady despite his hospital scars, carried a quiet pride. You did good, Evelyn. But it ain't just about us. It's about all of them, Dorothy, Jamal, Maria. I know, Olivia said. This is just the start. The raid's aftermath rippled through Mapleton. Sarah Johnson's Mapleton Accountability Network, armed with the vault's evidence, flooded news outlets with proof of the conspiracy. National media descended, their cameras capturing the warehouse's chart crates in Langston's perp walk. The community, battered but unbroken, rallied at the courthouse square, their signs now reading, Mapleton stands and no more lies. Samuel, against Olivia's protests, attended, his sling a badge of resilience, his presence drawing cheers. Olivia, reinstated to duty after the raid's success, met with Taylor at Fort Benning. "The DOJ's launching a pattern or practice investigation," he said, his tired eyes bright with purpose. "Langston's records implicate 3 other counties. This is bigger than Mapleton." Olivia nodded, but her thoughts were on Samuel, on the families whose land was stolen, on the fight still ahead. The conspiracy was broken, but its roots ran deep, and healing Mapleton would take more than arrests. As she left, her phone buzzed a text from Sarah. "Meeting tonight. People want you there. We're not stopping." Olivia smiled, a rare moment of hope. The community had risen and she'd fight beside them, stars or no stars, until justice was more than a word. The morning sun bathed Mapleton County's courthouse square in a golden glow, softening the edges of a town scarred by its own history. A year had passed since Samuel Carter's brutal traffic stop, a moment that had unraveled a generations-old conspiracy of corruption and racial exploitation. Now the square buzzed with life. Families of all backgrounds gathered for a celebration marking the end of federal oversight over the reformed sheriff's department. Children darted through the crowd, their laughter mingling with the strum of a local bluegrass band, while vendors handed out sweet tea and barbecue. Banners proclaimed Mapleton United, a hopeful declaration that felt both earned and fragile. General Olivia Carter, 55, stood at the edge of the crowd, her dress uniform replaced by a simple blazer and slacks, her 4 stars reinstated but her presence deliberately understated. The raid on Edward Langston's warehouse had broken the conspiracy, exposing a network that stretched from Sheriff Sullivan's office to Langston's boardrooms, with Officer Derek Malone as its brutal enforcer. Langston, Sullivan, and Judge Parker were in federal custody, facing RICO charges, while Malone awaited trial in a state penitentiary. The vault's records decades of land theft, payoffs, and judicial manipulation had sparked a national reckoning, with the Department of Justice launching investigations into similar schemes across the South. But for Olivia, the victory was personal. Her father, Samuel Carter, 75, stood at the celebration's heart, a quiet giant whose resilience had inspired a movement. His workshop, rebuilt with community donations after Langston's arson, was now more than a carpentry haven. It was a symbol of Mapleton's rebirth. Samuel's youth woodworking program, launched in the new space, drew teenagers from every corner of the county, their hammers and sanders bridging divides that had once seemed permanent. Olivia watched Samuel guide a young girl, Elena, through carving a dovetail joint, his hand steady despite arthritis. "Slow and steady, Elena," he said, his voice warm. "It's not about speed, it's about making something that lasts." Elena, whose Uncle Ray Thompson had risked everything to expose Langston, grinned. "Like you, Mr. Carter." Samuel chuckled, a sound Olivia hadn't heard in too long. She approached, her boots soft on the grass. "You're stealing the show, Dad," she said, her smile tinged with pride. Samuel glanced at her, his eyes crinkling. "Just doing my part, Evelyn. You're the one who turned this town upside down." Olivia shook her head. "You gave them something to fight for. That's worth more than any raid." The celebration was a testament to Mapleton's transformation. The sheriff's department, once a tool of oppression, operated under new leadership. Sheriff Darnell Williams, a former state police captain with a reputation for integrity, had instituted mandatory body cameras, civilian review boards, and community service requirements for officers. Traffic stop data, now public, was scrutinized monthly for bias, with disparities triggering immediate retraining. Officers Rodriguez and Chin, who turned whistleblower after Malone's arrest, led these efforts, their testimony against their former colleagues earning them both redemption and respect. The courthouse, too, had shed its corrupt skin. Judge Parker's conviction for witness tampering had paved the way for a new judicial appointee, a young woman from Atlanta with a passion for equity. Case assignments were randomized, ending the favoritism that had protected Malone's abuses. The Mapleton Accountability Network, founded by Sarah Johnson, had evolved from a scrappy volunteer group into a formal oversight body with real power, its members Dorothy Williams, Jamal, Maria Gonzalez sitting on advisory boards that shaped policy. Yet, as Olivia mingled with the crowd, she sensed the undercurrent of caution. Mapleton's wounds were deep, its trust fragile. The blue line flag still flew in some yards, and whispers of outsider interference lingered among Langston's loyalists. Healing wasn't a straight line, it was a daily choice, and not everyone was ready to make it. Sarah approached, Her teacher's poise softened by a genuine smile. "General, we wouldn't be here without you," she said, gesturing to the crowd. "This feels like a new Mapleton." "It's a start," Olivia said, her voice measured. "But starts need sustaining. You're the one keeping it going, Sarah." Sarah blushed, then lowered her voice. "We're planning a permanent memorial for the families who lost their land. A garden, maybe with names etched in stone." Samuels agreed to help design it. Olivia's throat tightened. The vault's records had revealed 68 Black-owned properties seized since the 1950s. Families like the Hendersons and Johnsons driven out by harassment. A memorial wasn't justice, but it was recognition, a step toward mending what was broken. The celebration's centerpiece was a speech by Sheriff Williams, his deep voice carrying over the square. "Mapleton's past doesn't define us," he said, his gaze steady. "We're building a department that serves everyone, Black, white, Hispanic, young, old. Accountability isn't a buzzword. It's our promise." The crowd applauded, but Olivia's eyes were on Samuel, who stood beside Williams, his sling gone but his scars a quiet testament. When he took the microphone, the square hushed. "I didn't fight in Vietnam to come home and live in fear," Samuel said, his voice steady. "I stayed in Mapleton because it's my home. Always has been. What we're doing now, teaching kids, holding power to account, that's what makes a home worth fighting for." The applause was thunderous, and Olivia felt a swell of pride mixed with something deeper, gratitude for a father who'd taught her resilience long before she earned her stars. As the crowd dispersed, she joined Samuel at his workshop, now a bright space filled with the scent of sawdust and possibility. Teenagers worked at benches, their chatter a hopeful hum, while Samuel showed Jamal how to plane a board smooth. "This is your legacy, Dad," Olivia said, watching the scene. "Not just the chairs, but this bringing people together." Samuel shrugged, but his eyes gleamed. "Legacy's a big word, Evelyn. I just want these kids to know they're worth something, no matter what this town used to tell them." Olivia nodded, her thoughts drifting to her own future. The Pentagon had reinstated her with a commendation, but Mapleton had changed her. Defending the Constitution, she realized, meant more than military missions. It meant ensuring its promises reached every corner of America, like this small Georgia town. She'd begun exploring new paths, consulting with the DOJ on civil rights enforcement, speaking at universities about systemic reform. Retirement loomed, not as an end but as a pivot to advocacy, where her strategic mind could tackle the domestic battles she'd once overlooked. The day's joy was tempered by a late-night call from Reynolds. "General, we've got a problem," he said, his voice tense. "A group of Langston's old allies, businessmen, some ex-deputies, are organizing. They're calling the reforms federal overreach, pushing for a recall of Sheriff Williams." Olivia's jaw tightened. "They're testing us. What's their move?" "Petitions, mostly, but there's talk of funding a rival candidate in the next election," Reynolds said. "And vandalism, blue-line graffiti on the Accountability Network's office. They're not done fighting." Olivia glanced at the photo on her desk. Samuel, receiving his discharge in 1971, his face a mirror of her own determination. "Then neither are we," she said. "Get me names, finances, anything we can use to counter them." The next morning, she met Sarah and the Accountability Network at their office, a modest storefront now defaced with spray-painted slurs. Dorothy scrubbed the paint, her hands steady but her eyes fierce. "They think this'll scare us," she said. "They're wrong." Olivia nodded, rolling up her sleeves to help. "We'll paint over it, and we'll out-organize them. Elections, petitions, media play their game, but better." The group planned a counter-campaign, leveraging the vault's evidence to expose Langston's lingering allies. Jamal, now a volunteer coordinator, designed flyers, while Maria worked with local radio to share resident stories. Olivia trained them in strategic messaging, drawing on her Pentagon experience to craft a narrative of unity and accountability. The work was grueling, but it knit Mapleton tighter, forging alliances across old divides. Samuel, meanwhile, expanded his woodworking program, inviting parents to join their kids in building community projects, a bench for the square, tables for the library. One evening, as Olivia helped him sand a plank, he shared a memory that stopped her cold. "Your mother, Lena, faced this same fight," he said, his voice soft. "Late 70s, she organized voters in our neighborhood. The sheriff back then, different man, same game, stopped her car, made threats. She never told you, didn't want you scared." Olivia's breath caught. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Lena wanted you to dream big, Evelyn," Samuel said. "Look at you now, 4 stars, changing the world." She'd be proud. The revelation reframed Olivia's journey. Her mother's quiet resistance, hidden to protect her, had shaped her path as much as Samuel's courage. Mapleton's fight wasn't new, it was a torch passed across generations, and she was carrying it now. As the celebration's echoes faded, Mapleton faced its next test. The recall petition gained traction, fueled by Langston's allies, but the Accountability Network fought back, their voices amplified by national media. Olivia, balancing her Pentagon duties with Mapleton's needs, knew the work was just beginning. Samuel's workshop, filled with the laughter of kids like Elena and Jamal, was proof that change could take root, but it needed tending. Standing on Samuel's porch, the rebuilt house glowing under the stars, Olivia felt the weight of her choices. "I'm thinking of retiring, Dad," she said, her voice quiet. "Taking what I've learned here, strategy, justice, and bringing it to places like this." Samuel nodded, his eyes on the horizon. "Your mother always said you were meant for more than medals. Whatever you choose, Evelyn, you're already making her proud." The rusty Ford pickup, restored by community hands, sat in the driveway, no longer a target but a symbol of endurance. Mapleton was changing, not just in policies but in hearts, and Olivia and Samuel, father and daughter, stood ready to nurture that change, one day, one fight, one lesson at a time. The twilight sky over Mapleton County draped the town in a soft purple haze, the kind that made even the scars of its past seem gentler. At Samuel Carter's rebuilt workshop, the hum of Sanders and the laughter of teenagers filled the air, a melody of hope that had been unthinkable a year ago. The 75-year-old veteran stood at a workbench, guiding a young boy, Marcus, through the delicate art of inlaying wood, his calloused hands steady despite the arthritis that lingered from his hospital days. Across the room, General Olivia Carter, 55, watched quietly, her 4-star uniform traded for a simple sweater, her presence a quiet anchor in the bustling space. The rusty Ford pickup, once mocked by Officer Derek Malone, sat proudly in the driveway, its restored frame gleaming under the porch light, a symbol of endurance, like Mapleton itself. This moment, serene yet profound, was the culmination of a journey that began with a single act of injustice. Samuel's brutal traffic stop, the spark that exposed a generations-long conspiracy of corruption and racial exploitation. Edward Langston's land grab, orchestrated through Sheriff Sullivan, Judge Parker, and Malone's violence, had crumbled under the weight of Olivia's strategic brilliance and the community's unyielding resolve. The warehouse raid, the vaults damning records, the federal prosecution's they'd torn down a system that had thrived on silence. But Mapleton's story wasn't just about dismantling, it was about rebuilding, about crafting something new from the ashes of betrayal. Olivia stepped outside, the cool evening air brushing her face as she leaned against the porch railing. The celebration at the courthouse square, marking the end of federal oversight, replayed in her mind. Families united, Sheriff Williams' promise of accountability, Samuel's quiet words that had moved a crowd to tears. Mapleton had changed, not just in policies but in its soul. The Mapleton Accountability Network, led by Sarah Johnson, Dorothy Williams, and young voices like Jamal and Maria Gonzalez, was a living testament to that shift. Body cameras, public data, civilian oversight, these were more than reforms. They were a reclaiming of trust, a vow to never again let power fester unchecked. Yet, Olivia knew the work was far from done. Langston's allies, though weakened, still stirred, their recall petitions and whispered resentments, a reminder that progress was a fragile thing. Samuel had said it best. Systems have a way of reverting when attention fades. His wisdom, born of a lifetime navigating Mapleton's prejudices, echoed in her own evolving mission. The Pentagon had welcomed her back with commendations, but Mapleton had reshaped her understanding of her oath. Defending the Constitution meant ensuring its promises reached every citizen, not just those with power or privilege. Samuel joined her on the porch, wiping sawdust from his hands. "You're quiet tonight, Evelyn," he said, his voice warm but probing. "Thinking about the future?" She nodded, her gaze on the stars. "I'm thinking about Mom. About what you told Meher, fight, her courage. I thought I was carving my own path, but it was theirs all along." Samuel's eyes softened. "Lena would have loved this," he said, gesturing to the workshop's glow. "Not just the justice but the kids. The way they're learning to build, to trust each other. That's what she fought for." The revelation about Lena Carter, who'd faced the same sheriff's harassment in the 1970s, had reframed Olivia's journey. Her mother's hidden resistance, shielding her daughter from fear, had planted the seeds of a general who'd challenge empires. Samuel's quiet dignity, enduring Malone's cruelty and Langston's threats, was its own rebellion, a refusal to be diminished. Together, they'd shown Olivia that justice wasn't just won in courtrooms or raids, it was lived, day by day, in the choices to stand tall. Mapleton's story held a mirror to America, revealing how individual injustices, traffic stops, fines, assaults were threads in a larger tapestry of systemic exploitation. Langston's scheme wasn't unique. It was a template, repeated in countless towns where power and prejudice intertwined. The vault's records dating to the 1950s proved it. Wealth built on stolen land, protected by corrupted institutions. But Mapleton also showed what was possible when courage met strategy, when a community refused to stay silent. Sarah's meetings, Jamal's defiance, Ray Thompson's flash drive, these were the sparks that ignited change. Olivia's thoughts turned to her next steps. Retirement was no longer a distant idea but a calling to take Mapleton's lessons to a broader stage, perhaps through advocacy or policy reform. She'd begun consulting with the DOJ, advising on civil rights investigations, and her speeches at universities drew crowds hungry for stories of resilience. Mapleton had taught her that change required both confrontation and creation, tearing down corrupt systems and building ones that honored every voice. She looked at Samuel, his face etched with the wisdom of survival. "What's next for you, Dad?" she asked. "You've got half the town calling you a hero." Samuel chuckled, shaking his head. "Hero's a big word. I just want to keep teaching, keep this workshop open. If Marcus and Elena can learn to make something beautiful together, maybe Mapleton can too." His words were a beacon, a reminder that lasting change wasn't just about laws but relationships, about seeing value in those once dismissed. The woodworking program, with its diverse teens crafting benches and memories, was Mapleton's heart beating anew. Olivia felt it in the square celebration, in the accountability network's tireless work, in the absence of blue line flags on some streets where they'd once flown. But the fight wasn't over. Langston's allies, though cowed, were regrouping, and other counties faced similar battles. Olivia knew Mapleton's story was a spark, not a solution. She pulled out her phone, drafting a message to Sarah. "Let's plan a national summit. Mapleton's motto: community oversight, transparency can spread. Count me in." As she hit send, the workshop's light spilled across the yard, illuminating the Ford pickup. Once a target of Malone's scorn, it now stood as a monument to endurance, its dense and polished telling a story of survival. Like Samuel, like Mapleton, it had weathered contempt and emerged stronger. It's worth recognized by a community learning to see anew. This is Mapleton's legacy and ours. That dignity persists through humiliation, that justice, though delayed, is worth pursuing. Samuel Carter's quiet strength and Olivia's relentless fight show us that individual courage, paired with collective action, can dismantle even the deepest rot. But the work continues in Mapleton, in your town, in every corner where power seeks to silence. Have you known someone like Samuel, whose resilience held firm against injustice? Or seen power used like Olivia's, to amplify the voiceless? Share their stories below. If you believe change demands both exposing truth and building anew, hit that like button to stand with communities fighting for justice. Subscribe for more stories of ordinary people forging extraordinary change, and share this with someone who needs to know that no system is too big to challenge. Together we can craft a future where every voice matters. The twilight sky over Mapleton County draped the town in a soft purple haze, the kind that made even the scars of its past seem gentler. At Samuel Carter's rebuilt workshop, the hum of Sanders and the laughter of teenagers filled the air, a melody of hope that had been unthinkable a year ago. The 75-year-old veteran stood at a workbench, guiding a young boy, Marcus, through the delicate art of inlaying wood, his calloused hands steady despite the arthritis that lingered from his hospital days. Across the room, General Olivia Carter, 55, watched quietly, her 4-star uniform traded for a simple sweater, her presence a quiet anchor in the bustling space. The rusty Ford pickup, once mocked by Officer Derek Malone, sat proudly in the driveway, its restored frame gleaming under the porch light, a symbol of endurance, like Mapleton itself. This moment, serene yet profound, was the culmination of a journey that began with a single act of injustice. Samuel's brutal traffic stop, the spark that exposed a generations-long conspiracy of corruption and racial exploitation. Edward Langston's land grab, orchestrated through Sheriff Sullivan, Judge Parker and Malone's violence, had crumbled under the weight of Olivia's strategic brilliance and the community's unyielding resolve. The warehouse raid, the vault's damning records, The federal prosecution's theed torn down a system that had thrived on silence. But Mapleton's story wasn't just about dismantling. It was about rebuilding, about crafting something new from the ashes of betrayal. Olivia stepped outside, the cool evening air brushing her face as she leaned against the porch railing. The celebration at the courthouse square, marking the end of federal oversight, replayed in her mind. Families united, Sheriff Williams' promise of accountability, Samuel's quiet words that had moved a crowd to tears. Mapleton had changed, not just in policies but in its soul. The Mapleton Accountability Network, led by Sarah Johnson, Dorothy Williams, and young voices like Jamal and Maria Gonzalez, was a living testament to that shift. Body cameras, public data, civilian oversight, these were more than reforms. They were a reclaiming of trust, a vow to never again let power fester unchecked. Yet, Olivia knew the work was far from done. Langston's allies, though weakened, still stirred, their recall petitions and whispered resentments, a reminder that progress was a fragile thing. Samuel had said it best. Systems have a way of reverting when attention fades. His wisdom, born of a lifetime navigating Mapleton's prejudices, echoed in her own evolving mission. The Pentagon had welcomed her back with commendations, but Mapleton had reshaped her understanding of her oath. Defending the Constitution meant ensuring its promises reached every citizen, not just those with power or privilege. Samuel joined her on the porch, wiping sawdust from his hands. "You're quiet tonight, Evelyn," he said, his voice warm but probing. "Thinking about the future?" She nodded, her gaze on the stars. "I'm thinking about Mom. About what you told Meher, fight her courage. I thought I was carving my own path, but it was theirs all along." Samuel's eyes softened. "Lena would have loved this," he said, gesturing to the workshop's glow. "Not just the justice but the kids. The way they're learning to build, to trust each other. That's what she fought for." The revelation about Lena Carter, who'd faced the same sheriff's harassment in the 1970s, had reframed Olivia's journey. Her mother's hidden resistance, shielding her daughter from fear, had planted the seeds of a general who'd challenge empires. Samuel's quiet dignity, enduring Malone's cruelty and Langston's threats, was its own rebellion, a refusal to be diminished. Together they'd shown Olivia that justice wasn't just won in courtrooms or raids. It was lived day by day, in the choices to stand tall. Mapleton's story held a mirror to America, revealing how individual injustices, traffic stops, fines, assaults were threads in a larger tapestry of systemic exploitation. Langston's scheme wasn't unique. It was a template, repeated in countless towns where power and prejudice intertwined. The vault's records dating to the 1950s proved it. Wealth built on stolen land, protected by corrupted institutions. But Mapleton also showed what was possible when courage met strategy, when a community refused to stay silent. Sarah's meetings, Jamal's defiance, Ray Thompson's flash drive, these were the sparks that ignited change. Connecting with you right here, right now. Alright folks, let's get real for a second. Mapleton's drama might sound like something out of a Hollywood blockbuster, but it's not just a story. It's a wake-up call, and it's ringing louder than my neighbor's leaf blower on a Sunday morning. Picture this, you're driving your trusty old car, maybe not as shiny as it once was, and boom, lights flash, sirens wail, and suddenly you're in Samuel Carter's shoes, facing a power trip dressed in a badge. Or maybe you're scrolling through your local newsfeed in 2025, seeing headlines about shady land deals or routine stops that smell fishier than a week-old catfish. Sound familiar? That's because Mapleton isn't just a dot on a Georgia map, it's every town where power plays hide behind paperwork and smiles. Here's the kicker. Samuel and Olivia didn't just fight for their own backyard. They showed us that injustice loves to hide in plain sight, like that one sock that vanishes in the laundry but somehow runs the whole wash cycle. The lesson? Those isolated incidents we shrug off a fine here, a stop there are often puzzle pieces in a bigger, uglier picture. Whether it's a developer eyeing your grandma's land or a local official who's a bit too cozy with the right people, the Mapleton playbook is still out there, folks. But so is the antidote: courage, community, and a refusal to look the other way. Let's have a chuckle while we're at Imogene Malone trying to explain his broken tail light excuse to a room full of TikTok sleuths today. He'd be memed into oblivion before lunch. But seriously, the humor fades when you realize systems like Langston's thrive because we're too busy, too tired, or too it's not my problem to notice. Samuel kept sanding his chairs, Olivia kept strategizing, and Mapleton kept showing up. That's the real education here. Change starts when you decide to care, even if it's just asking, "Hey, why does my town's budget always favor the same 3 guys in suits?" So here's where you come in. Have you ever spotted a Malone in your life, someone throwing their weight around because they think they can? Or maybe you've got a Samuel in your corner, someone whose quiet strength keeps you going? Drop their story in the comments, we're all ears. And trust me, those tales are the fuel for change. And here's a big one. What's one thing your community could do to keep power in check? A town hall? A public data dashboard? A good old-fashioned group chat to call out nonsense? Share it below, because ideas like those are how Mapleton went from oppressed to unstoppable. Oh, and before you scroll away to binge that new sci-fi series, no judgment, I'm hooked too, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. Our channel is packed with stories like this, ordinary folks turning the tables on injustice, one rusty pickup at a time. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next one, because trust me, you'll want to be in the front row when we dive into another town's fight for fairness. And if you know someone who needs a nudge to stand up or speak out, share this video. Let's keep the spark alive, from Mapleton to wherever you're watching. Together, we're not just watching history, remaking it. So tell us, what's your Mapleton moment, and how are you going to make it count?